Hey everyone, here we are again. It's Thursday evening, 7 o'clock for our Lenten study. One of my colleagues was joking about how great it is with these virtual gatherings that we don't have to worry about what we ate for dinner. So my garlic bread will not impact you, although I hope my teeth are clean. So as we finish up our dinner and gather at this time, we welcome everyone as we come into this time together. And I was looking for a hymn to share, again, just to read as we give a couple seconds, couple minutes here for people to log in. And so this one, our theme tonight is hospitality. So here's one called We Come as Guests Invited. It's a communion hymn. It says, we come as guests invited when Jesus bids us dine, his friends on earth united to share the bread and wine. The bread of life is broken, the wine is freely poured for us in solemn token of Christ our dying Lord. We eat and drink receiving from Christ the grace we need, and in our hearts believing on him by faith we feed. With wonder and thanksgiving for love that knows no end, we find in Jesus living our ever-present friend. One bread is ours for sharing, one single fruitful vine, our fellowship declaring, renewed in bread and wine, renewed, sustained, and given by token, sign, and word, the pledge and seal of heaven, the love of Christ our Lord. So as we think about communion, it is definitely a place where hospitality is shared with each other. All right, so I will go ahead then and start here. I was looking to see, I know we have one in our white binder, and I did not mark it ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and just start our program here, and people can jump in when they get here. All right. So tonight's program is brought to us by the letter H. Does that ring a bell to anyone? I don't know why I had Sesame Street in my head today. My kids are too old for it, but as I was working on hospitality, I just kept thinking about the letter H. So here we are tonight as we start on our spiritual practice of hospitality. So what is hospitality? We have lots of ways to look at hospitality. It is definitely something that anybody and everybody can practice. It is seen as a spiritual discipline across all religions and faith practices, just like fasting that we did last week. So hospitality is definitely one of those spiritual practices, as we've kind of been looking at. If you are someone who is wrestling with what it means to be spiritual and not religious, you could definitely, as a spiritual person, outside of the bonds of the church, outside of being a part of a congregation, you can definitely practice hospitality. So hospitality, it is the way in which we care for one another. Hospitality is giving of ourselves to provide comfort to another. There's so many different ways to describe it. So in the book Soul Feast, she talks about hospitality, and she wants to separate the word hospitality, the concept of hospitality, from entertainment. We can all be really good hosts, and we can all throw a really good party, but is that necessarily hospitality in the sacred spiritual way. We might go over to someone's house for dinner and be like, oh, they were such good hosts, or people can say to you, thank you so much for having us over. You were wonderful hosts. But that tends to be more on the entertainment. We have friends that come and gather with us. So the spiritual side of hospitality, she defines as hospitality means receiving the other from the heart into our own dwelling place and providing for the need, the comfort, and the delight of the other. Hospitality is an expression of love. We include the guest in the very best of what we ourselves have received and can then offer. So I think about that. How often do we, when we have guests, offer the best of what we have? Maybe on a special occasion, we actually pull out the china, right? We're having you over, and you are special to us, and we are going to use the best of what we have to celebrate this time together. But we might not do that for every guest that comes to our house. So when we think about the spiritual practice of hospitality, we want to think about it as an expression of love for the other, and the ways in which we can give of ourselves, give of our resources, give of what we have to another. And really the best examples I've seen of this is when traveling to other countries. I've been to several different places, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Kenya, where people don't have a lot and resources are very scarce. And yet when we come, they find the resources. They provide these beautiful meals for us because it is a sense of this love of you are here with us and we want this moment to really matter. And in order to do so, we provide. And so you just wonder like where all the food comes from because it just keeps showing up. And it truly is an amazing gift if you look at it through the lens of the spiritual practice. It really warms the heart. You feel the sacred presence amongst you. Or you could come at it and complain that you don't like the food. So there's, different ways in which people can approach hospitality. We can engage it as a spiritual practice, or we can reject it, right? We don't always have to welcome another person's hospitality towards us. And perhaps we've had experiences where others haven't welcomed our hospitality. So it's a two-way street. It's being both the host and the guest and understanding what that means, because we sometimes are the guest as well as sometimes we are the host. So hospitality, thinking of it not as a form of entertainment, of having people over just for a good time, but really as a spiritual practice of love. Oh, my cards, I'm going backwards here. We don't want to do that. All right, I numbered them, so this is good for me. All right. So as I mentioned a little bit here, spirituality is not, or hospitality can be a practiced by all, right? It is how we care for the other. And, I wrestled with whether or not to even do hospitality tonight because we are all really isolated, and it's one of those things that how do you do hospitality when you're stuck at home? So I wanted to address some of that as well, because we need to pay attention because hospitality is truly happening all around us. So just some real specific examples, and some of these people that are doing these things, again, might not consider themselves a religious person. They might be doing them as a spiritual way of connecting to the world. Remember, spirituality is connecting to something greater than ourselves. So right now, the way in which this world is really addressing the well-being of the other is by people making the fabric masks for the doctors, the nurses, it's amazing. If you see, there's groups they're just pumping them out. Somebody said their mom made like 75 the other day. People are really getting into this because it is a way to offer hospitality in a time where we feel rather helpless. But it is an incredible act of hospitality. People are providing meals, right? I mentioned I think it was the Thursday morning Bible study that here in Parsippany, there was a GoFundMe and $20,000 was raised like instantaneously to provide meals to the nurses and the doctors and the hospital staff and the people that have to be taking care of others. I mean, that again, it's a true act of hospitality to say, you know what, maybe I need to sacrifice a little bit of what I have right now, my savings, my income, in order to provide for someone else's well-being. So we're seeing these incredible acts of generosity and kindness, and those can all be defined as the spiritual practice of hospitality. Parsippany today did a townwide make cards for the nursing homes, and you were supposed to drop them off at a certain location today. And food drives. There's various places that are just, asking people, make donations. These are the things that some of our families that have lost their jobs, they need cereal and peanut butter and those sort of things. Again, it's this act of hospitality. Our soup kitchens, Faith Kitchen is still serving lunch every day in Dover. They're having to take safety precautions, but 85 bagged lunches of sandwiches. Again, the act of hospitality, of really reaching out and making sure that the well-being of others are taken care of. And some groups do it truly out of love. They really do. And other groups get a little cranky. You might wonder why they're even there. So you can see when true hospitality is happening. And that's what we want to work on, is that spiritual practice of where that hospitality, that act becomes really authentic and positive and really gets people's attention. All right, so scripture passage today, Hebrews 13. Perhaps many of you know this passage. It says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware." As Christians, we believe that hospitality is extended to all. So it's very easy for us to do hospitality to friends, to people like us, but to extend it to the stranger, that becomes a whole lot harder, right? Especially in our world today with stranger danger. We really are not trusting, which makes sense because there's a lot to not trust. But to pay attention to what it means to offer hospitality to the stranger amongst us. And so that brings us to the Matthew 25 passage that we are Matthew 25 church, right? When they said, "Jesus, when did we see you a stranger?" And he says, "When you did it to the least of these, you did it to me." So Jesus is taking that whole sense of stranger and saying, just because that person is not like you, that person is not in your circle or of your kin or of even of your culture, that person is me, right? Is Christ. So the challenge for us when we really practice authentic hospitality is to see the face of Christ in the other. So again, it's really just happening so naturally right now. When people are faced with crisis, it is truly amazing, the goodness that comes forth. And so, all the strangers out there that we are praying for, that we are providing for, right? We don't know the nurses. Well, we might know some of them, but we don't know all those nurses and doctors and the grocery store clerks and the truck drivers and all those people out there doing their jobs. But we're recognizing them now, and they are the stranger, but they are angels unaware, right? They are truly angels right now. as they do all these things to kind of keep us moving along. So real hospitality actually begins with God. So my next card should be God. So true hospitality begins with God. So how does that work? Well, we have this thing called creation. Our God, the very first act of hospitality was that God created the world. God created this beautiful planet and created the life that lives amongst it with the things that we need to live, right? I mean, what an act of hospitality that God gave us this place, gave us places to shelter for every kind of animal out there, right? Everything knows how to make its nest, to find its place to live, and the foods that we need, right? That's all part of God's design and plan, that there's food and there's shelter. And that's an amazing act of hospitality. So unfortunately, the question is, are we being good guests? So if God is the original host, if God created all this world and God created us to be in God's image, and God is this incredible actor of hospitality, first, are we even receiving the gifts that God has given to us? Are we receiving them in a sacred and relational way? And so in the book, she really kind of challenges us to think about, sometimes we don't have good guests, and that's hard. and sometimes we are not being very good guests to God. To think about how do we thank God for the roof over our heads and the food that we eat. I just wolfed down my dinner. Did I say thank you? No, right? Like sometimes we just get going, right? And so we need to slow down sometimes and really just say, when we think about hospitality, think about how God has been that host for us, and has given us such good things in this world. And so she says, so often humans want to take the role from God. God is the host. We are the guests. And so much we just desire to be the host, and that we forget. We forget that so much of what we have is a blessing from God. So as we journey in our lives and we think about, especially as we're home a lot, all right, there's perfect opportunities for us just to start to name our blessings and to thank God for all these wonderful things that God has provided for us, even in these hard times. And then she also talks about how in creation, we're not being very good partners with the other created orders of this world, the other living beings, and that we really need to think about what it means to be a good host and what it means to be a good guest when it comes to the other living entities of our planet. And the first thing that came to my mind is, all this talk right now about how much we need pollinators, the bees, and how we just have not been very good either hosts or guests when it comes to using pesticides. So I couldn't bring my butterflies in here today because they it's too cold for me to release them. So this is what ties into hospitality, right? I've now raised my caterpillars. They have transitioned to the chrysalis and they have emerged as butterflies. And I'm supposed to release them. Like, you're supposed to do this, but to be a good host, to the act of hospitality, it needs to be 55 degrees outside and the temperature is still dropping at night below 40. And so these poor butterflies, I'm trying to be really good with them, a good steward of them. And so they're going to start laying eggs if I don't release them. So now I put a plant in with them because I don't know what's going to happen next. So I can't move the container to show you because I have the plant in it. It's just too heavy to move. But I was very intentional of not sending them out to just freeze and die outside. But I'd rather just keep them in, and you know, they deserve to be outside, but I just can't in my heart let them out when it's too cold. So we'll see if we get the next generation. That might be kind of fun to see what happens. One of the things I read said you're going to end up with like hundreds of caterpillars. Don't do it. So if I start handing them out to you all, that'll be my Easter gift to you is baby caterpillars. Okay. All right. So, but you know, how do we share this planet? How are we a host? How are we a guest with the other things that live amongst us? And we need to really pay attention to that as a spiritual practice. So often when we think hospitality, it is food, it is company, it is, you know, just kind of the basics of being together with people and being kind. But it's such a deeper thing than that. Actually, one of the articles I read today about hospitality, this guy was trying to start a new church, and they went around the whole neighborhood and handed out light bulbs and a little thing that invited people to the church that was all about let your light shine. And how he said, you know, doing this random act of kindness was such a good practice of hospitality. And I looked at it in comparison to what she's saying, and I was like, no, that was a really nice random act of kindness. But in a sense, it really wasn't hospitality. So, you know, we can be kind to people. We can do random acts of kindness. But it's not always the spiritual practice of hospitality because they weren't meeting people's deep needs by giving them a light bulb. Maybe they were meeting their deep needs if they actually did come to the church, but just the act of giving someone a light bulb as a form of evangelism, that's not hospitality. So I just was kind of taken by that article because it was all about how do we act and how do we do Christian hospitality? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I think they missed the mark. So as we go back to God, our loving God models for us hospitality, right? I just shared with you all the ways in which God has given us this planet and the food that we eat. And all God does is, as the host, is just asks us to receive it. And part of that hospitality that our God has given to us as well is grace and love and forgiveness. And so if you've ever been a host and you've offered someone hospitality and they haven't taken it, you know, it can feel weird, right? And so when we think about, here's God giving us these things, and some people just, no, thank you, no, or I don't deserve it, or, you know, some people do spiritually wrestle with it, but some people just say, it's not for me. But God's given it to them. And God calls us just to open ourselves to receiving God's hospitality. And that might be one of the differences between people that practice hospitality as a spiritual discipline but are not religious people. They might not think about God as the initial giver of hospitality. They might just think of themselves being the host, themselves being the act of hospitality. But as a religious people, we always want to come back to, you know, God is at the center of this. Oh, and the story of hospitality here was Mary and Martha, right? That is often used as Mary and Martha, and good old Martha. I'm a Martha, right? She's in the kitchen. She's making sure hospitality. We got to feed. We got to make sure everybody's comfortable. We got to take care of your needs. But the twist she put on the story today is that in this one, Mary is the one receiving the hospitality. Even though it's in her house, she is being the guest. She is in the presence of God, and she's the one receiving instead of trying to give. So that made me look at this passage in a whole different way. I often looked at it, of course, you want to sit and you want to learn and you want to be still and to know that, this is Jesus with you, and this is an awesome opportunity to learn. But to actually think of it as an act of hospitality, and that she was giving of herself to receive, and how much we just sometimes we don't want to receive. We want to be the one that gives. So I thought that was a nice twist on looking at that story. So hospitality begins with God. God gives to us. We are to be the guests and we are to receive. And then this is the one we often think about, is hospitality within our community, right? Our scriptures tell us we are called to love one another. So as we seek to love God, right? We're going to seek to love God, and we're going to seek to accept God's hospitality. Then we are to take that and then share it with others. So it has to start from the source, and we have to receive it, and then we give. So that's part of the practice, is to make sure that we are attuned to the Creator, to the giver, and then act it outwards, to then share with others. And when we think about spiritual acts of hospitality, we can be really intentional, and you can even say to yourself, I am practicing this act of hospitality because God is a God of hospitality, and I am God's child. Like, you can really just say it, so you get into the practice of understanding that as you provide for others, as you act, you are doing it in response to God's gift to you and how you have received God's hospitality. So this goes on to talk about how communities can embrace hospitality. We are all parts of different communities, whether it's our church or clubs or school groups or moms groups or book clubs, whatever. We're parts of different things. But a community that embraces a deep practice of hospitality is open-minded. And it honors each other's points of view. So we want to, I often say, we want to be able to share freely and feel that we're safe to share and ask questions. And there might be times that we have to agree to disagree, right? That's hospitality. That's saying, I'm going to honor you enough to hear what you think and what you have to say, but you need to honor me too and hear what I have to say. And then we can feel safe with each other. And that in itself, and a safe space of sharing, is an act of hospitality. She goes on to talk about, I thought this was interesting, to value the strangeness of the stranger. And so I mentioned before, it's so easy to offer hospitality to people that are like us. But when we're interacting with people that are maybe of a different culture or they speak a different language, or just different generations even these days, right? We might feel like, I don't know how to interact. So to value the strangeness in the stranger, and to think about, okay, they're coming at life from whatever viewpoint that they're coming from, but there's something that still binds us together, and that's our common humanity. So we're always wanting to think about who we are, and Jesus was so good at that, right? He went to the Samaritan woman and saw her common humanity. She was someone he shouldn't have been with. He shouldn't have been talking to at all. But the common humanity, and then their time together, in the act of hospitality, and her transformation into her recreation of life, that we looked at a couple Sundays ago. So it's our common humanity that binds us together when we are interacting with the stranger. All right, so there's a variety of ways to practice hospitality. So we can practice it just in our own homes. We can think about the ways we choose to raise our children. Do we force them to focus on a certain thing, right? I was a very competitive soccer player, so am I going to force my kids to play soccer, or am I going to give them the freedom to choose what avenue they want to explore when it comes to athletics or art, or music, right? Savannah's decided to play the violin. Nobody in my family plays the violin, but we're allowing her the space, right? The hospitality that she knows she has this place in the house to explore things that appeal to her. So hospitality can happen at home. Could definitely happen in the workplace. So if you work on a team or things like that, you have to listen to the other. You can't always say, you got to do it my way or not at all. The give and take of being in a workplace, honoring each other's gifts. If you know so and so is really good at numbers, maybe you give them something and you take the writing piece off of the group work. Or so the hospitality of thinking of the other, thinking of gifts and abilities. The neighborhood, there's all kinds of ways, especially now that we're all kind of home. Perhaps you're seeing neighbors that you didn't even know were your neighbors, because people are out and about walking around. And we've seen on the news ways in which neighbors, right? There's this real act of connectedness despite our isolation, as groups of people go out on their balconies and sing or play music. Some neighborhoods, they're doing like at 7 o'clock every night, go out to the end of your driveway and just say hello to everyone. Or we're talking about the rainbows in the windows, or the bears in the windows. There's people are finding ways to try to create community. And that can be acts of hospitality. We might not be saying, come over and have dinner with me, although people are doing virtual dinners. So if you miss somebody and they have the way to do a video, invite them over for dinner and just set up your computer and have dinner together. So there's so much creativity going on right now as people are trying to navigate this. Once this is over, you can have an open house. What we like to do in our neighborhood is just invite everyone in the neighborhood over to make s'mores. So I'm sure sometime this summer or early fall, we will have a big s'more party where we have a fire pit going and all the neighborhood kids will come over and we'll all have s'mores together. So that's a way of just kind of building community and offering hospitality and getting to know each other in a better way. And to think about just hospitality, how can we work in our greater community? The schools are our schools places that are welcoming and offering our children hospitality. The medical system, how does that function and work? And right now we are seeing, even at its stress level, it is doing its best to offer the hospitality, to offer the care that it needs to do. Do we have good parks that are accessible to people? Things like that. To really think about, what is life like in our communities, and are there ways to ensure that the parks are accessible to all. There's some of these new swings that they have been putting in for children that maybe have sensory issues or are on the autism scale, but there's like these special swings that are being installed in some of the parks, and that's an act of hospitality. It's saying your child is also welcome here. So those sort of things are really neat to see. All right, so hospitality in the church, right? Hospitality in the church. So this one talks about how is it that in the church, how do we use our space? That's one way to look at hospitality, right? How do we use our building, and how does it function for the greater community? And so for those that don't know, on Monday nights, we do have a mental health support group that meets. So we offer that space. It's hospitality for the healing and wholeness of others. We've been providing lunches for the Habitat for Humanity volunteers and offering them hospitality. that way. And family promise, right? Fixing a dinner, spending the night with families that are facing homelessness. Those are ways that the church comes together and does these collective acts together of hospitality. We're pretty good at doing hospitality as mission, and we could work probably more on hospitality with each other. And so she asks, how well does the church honor each other's gifts? So, like, if you are very talented with something and you've never been given the opportunity at church to use that gift, we're not practicing hospitality very well. We should be looking at what people enjoy doing, what they're good at, what gives them joy in the church, and empowering them to be able to do that. And also to churches in general, and does our church, do we offer safe space where we can speak and listen? It goes back to that part I mentioned earlier, to agree to disagree. And some of our groups, especially our Thursday morning Bible study, we try really hard to provide that space where we can speak freely and listen. Do we ask the harder question? Do all of our members feel welcomed? So in a church, some people on the edge might not necessarily feel as welcomed as others that have been there for a longer period of time or have gotten more involved. And how do we work on that? How do we engage hospitality and really help all members of the church really feel that that's a place that is loving and accepting and a welcoming environment that's going to give to them, right, for them to receive God's love in the way that we hopefully feel it as well. So that is what she talks about with the church. I mean, there's a whole chapter more on that, but she wraps it up with saying that hospitality actually is a justice issue. Sometimes people think, social justice, should the church be involved in that? Well, God is very much focused on justice. Justice is just taking care, right? Taking care of the other. It goes back to that Matthew 25, to feed the hungry, to provide to water to the thirsty, drink to the thirsty, clothing to the naked, to be there for the stranger, to visit those in prison and those that are sick. Those are issues of justice, right? So as we think about hospitality as a spiritual act, we are engagers in justice. And that was actually the other song I was looking for when we started today. We have a song in the white binder about being at the table, everyone at the table, everyone's welcome to the table, and then we'll be living out God's justice. It's one of my favorite songs that we've added to the binder. So just in wrapping up, right? So hospitality, again, it's the spiritual act. It's not just an act of kindness. It's truly engaging our love, our acceptance of God's hospitality for us, and then us sharing that out, reflecting it back out into the world, and letting people know that they are worthy, that they are loved, and that that the resources that we have are resources to be shared. And often the scriptures talk about that as the least of these. And so we do try to live out our hospitality a lot through mission. So that's what I have for you all tonight. And, as we move forward, we have Palm Sunday this Sunday. So the palms are at the church. I'm going to go over tomorrow morning. I'm going to put them out on the porch in a big container. So over Friday, Saturday, just swing by the church, grab some palms. If you want them delivered to you, just let me know. And we have some people that are willing to drop them off at your doorstep. We won't even, say hello. We'll leave them at the doorstep for you. But we do want everybody to have their palms. And if you get creative and you want to send me a picture before, I don't know, Saturday afternoon, I can try and put together a virtual slideshow of our palm parade since we won't really have that in person this year. So blessings, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. And just pay attention to how you see hospitality unfolding all around us during this time, because it's there. Amen.